to make sure we recite the prayer with the right kind of motivation. So, as always, just settle our mind to think, may this session or may the entire day become the cause for us to get to know our mind better, to learn to become more mindful, so that we're able to reduce our afflictive emotions and instead cultivate more love, compassion, generosity, and all the other positive qualities. So that one day we'll be able to actualize our fullest potential. And attain the awakened state of a Buddha. To be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. Try to really feel that from the depth of your heart. So then, let's recite the prayers together.
באמצעות המצבורים של הקשבה לדרמה, הוא השיג בודהיות ולהועיל ליצורים הנודדים. בבודה, בדרמה ובקהילה העילאית, מבקש מקלט עד למערה. באמצעות המצבורים של הקשבה לדרמה, הוא השיג בודהיות ולהועיל ליצורים הנודדים. בבודה, בדרמה ובקהילה העילאית, מבקש מקלט עד להערה. באמצעות המצבורים של הקשבה לדרמה, הוא השיג בודהיות ולהועיל ליצורים הנודדים. לא יזכו כל בעלי התודעה באושר ובגורמי האושר. לא יפרדו כל בעלי התודעה מסבל ומגורמי הסבל. לעולם לא יפרדו כל בעלי התודעה מאושר מכל כאב. לא יפתחו כל בעלי התודעה את מידת ההשתוות ללא משוא פנים של התחשבות ושל סבל. So the 4 close placements of mindfulness, just once more. Okay, so first of all, they're described as either wisdom or mindfulness. Okay, so wisdom or mindfulness. So a close placement of mindfulness either refers to the awareness we call wisdom or the awareness we call mindfulness. Okay, why those two? Because the practice of the close placement of mindfulness refers to the practice of generating wisdom and understanding of reality about ourselves, other phenomena, and then after that with mindfulness to grow familiar with it, the practice of growing familiar with our understanding so that we're able to internalize it and transform our actions of body, speech and mind accordingly. So that's basically the practice of Buddhism, gaining an understanding of reality, of how things really exist, and therefore, once we have that understanding, familiarizing our mind with that understanding so that our actions transform. Because our actions are all the result, our present actions are a result of our sense of reality, of our deep felt sense of reality. I feel I'm the center of the universe. That's my reality. And so therefore I act accordingly. All my actions are informed by that. All my actions are controlled by that. Right? And so if that's not true, if I'm not the center of the universe, well, understanding that that's not true, and therefore my actions will change accordingly. Usually I say this like when we get angry, when we have anger, when we have attachment, it feels like it just happens naturally. But actually we don't do anything without a reason. We also don't get angry without a reason. It feels that way maybe because we're not aware of the reason that we have, but there's always a person did such and such, a person did this and this, did that and that. So we always reason, actually our mind always has reasons. They may not be correct reasons. Oftentimes they're not, most of the time they're not, especially when afflictions arise, but they're still reasons. So here we apply reasons again, that which we're so good at doing, applying reason, but this time to try to modify our understanding. In other words, correct it. Get an understanding of things really, how things really exist. So this is what the close placement of mindfulness refers to. Generate an understanding, mainly through wisdom, and then through mindfulness, grow familiar, habituate ourselves to it, so that our actions change accordingly. Okay. Now, more specifically, mindfulness basically focuses on all phenomena. But there's a way of categorizing those phenomena in terms of their importance or in terms of the effectiveness of thinking about them in that way. So first, our body. So usually we say body and mind, that's what makes us a person. So if everything is about me, I'm the center of the universe, well, what is that I? And basically, without going any further into analysis, in general, mind and body, that's what I point at when I say me. But right now, who I am right now is very much determined by my body, in the sense that every living being has this incredible mind that has the potential to love anyone, to have love and compassion towards anyone, has that incredible ability to know things, to truly understand them. But because of our misperception and the way in which we limit our own mind, or in which this misperception limits our ability of the mind, as a result of that, we are born in states such as a human being, or as an animal and so forth. So it's very difficult to believe that these dogs that I've just seen outside, they're roaming around there, that they have Buddha nature, they're this incredible mind. Come on, it's a dog. Or the little spider in my room that's kind of like walking up and down the wall. It's just tiny, so not wrong. So this tiny spider. And so very difficult to imagine that this spider has this incredible mind. It's just a spider. But actually from a Buddhist point of view, it does. But it's so limited by the body it has taken. A very limited nervous system. I don't even know, do spiders have brains? Well, yeah, a little bit then, not like ours, but still very limited by the bases they have. So we're actually lucky as humans, our brains are much greater, there's much more capacity. So in comparison to some of the other forms of life, our mind can unfold in a much more effective way. But it's still limited. The things we can see, hear, taste, very limited. The capacity of memory, we don't even remember. Forget about past lives. I don't remember what I had for lunch 3 weeks ago. It's like my memory of the past is very sketchy. I only get a few things that I remember when I was a child. Not much left. So my capacity of memory is limited. Our capacity of memory is very limited. So our mind is very limited because of the body that we have. Which is why, initially, to understand our limited state of existence, we focus on the body. which in a way includes the mind, because as just explained, although we have this amazing mind, it is temporarily limited by our body. The good news is our body, although it limits us, if we train our mind efficiently, it is mind over body. So even if you have a brain injury, if you can train your mind effectively, you can go beyond that brain injury. And there's enough scientific evidence for that. So I'll share with you some of my favorite stories. One of my favorite stories is about a group of Christian nuns in the West. I'm sure many of you have heard me say that before. There's a group of Christian nuns in the U.S. who've been known to do a lot of social work. They're socially very engaged, and they live to a very high age, whatever the reasons are for that. Anyway, so they have agreed to dedicate, you may have heard of that, donated their brain to science. So many of them live to the age of 90, 95, 100. And then after they pass away, the scientists take their brains and they analyze them. And it needs to be known, these nuns are very socially active. They teach, they still teach, although they're quite old. They still teach, they help communities, different communities who are socially disadvantaged, etc. And what scientists have found is that many of these nuns, who are bright as it can be, have Alzheimer's. Their brains show symptoms of Alzheimer's, but they didn't manifest. Those nuns were healthy, they were clear, they were very clear memory. So despite their brain showing the symptoms of Alzheimer, the nuns never showed those symptoms. So you can Google this. It's like right now it's kind of, you find it in a lot of places. It's not just one article, a lot of articles about that. So from a Buddhist point of view, well, big surprise. Well, in a way, of course, it is still amazing, but it's like the social activism, I suppose, this is my interpretation of it, because they were so socially active and they made a point in like reaching out, etc. So keeping their mind active in such a way could even be a factor such that they didn't have, or could overwhelm these symptoms of Alzheimer. And another story, and again, it's not a story, there's a documentary that was made about this, about a British boy who was born with only 3% of a brain. So in the womb already, doctors had found that when he was in his mother's womb, that he didn't have much of a brain, only his stem brain, only we call that stem brain, right? So only that brain was there. I mean, it had grown, but the rest was just dark. There was nothing in his skull, maybe some liquid, I don't know. And so his parents were told, well, your son doesn't have a brain. There was also a spinal injury, so they knew that he may not be able to walk, only because of the spinal injury. That was, well, only because, I'm saying just that was the theory, that he couldn't walk. And the parents decided, no, we don't want to abort this child. We want to give him a chance to live. And so the boy was born, and they thought he was going to die right away. But he didn't. He didn't. And he survived, and he thrived. And the parents taught him all sorts of things to move. He could move, and eventually he started to talk. He had surgery at his spine, so he's still paralyzed, but he grew up just like a normal boy. And I couldn't understand it, but there was a lot of assistance. The government assisted those parents, and so he had the opportunity to learn certain things, to do a lot of brain exercises without a brain, to do all these exercises, and so he in the documentary, he's kind of with this little wheelchair, and he's like, joking around. He's very happy. He's very active. So anyway, he learned everything that a normal child learns. So there you go, mind over body. So the mind was there. But then they did a check on him, and at the age of about 3 or 4, they did another brain check, and his brain had grown. Now he has 95% of a brain. So that totally supports the Buddhist idea. The mind creates the body. The mind creates, and it's mind over body. So he didn't have a brain. I have that documentary with me. If anyone is interested, I'll be happy to share it with you. Or maybe give it to Leora, and Leora can pass it on. It's very interesting. And it shows all these tests they did. And so that totally supports what you find in the Pramanavartika, for instance, the second chapter of Dhammakirti's text called Pramanavartika, there's a whole analysis. It goes on forever about what is more important, the brain or the mind? And the conclusion is the mind. It's the mind over and over. We create our experiences. We create meditation changes the brain. Our thoughts change our brain. So even if you don't have a brain, you end up getting a brain. So anyway, so there's a lot of scientific evidence nowadays. I think with these nuns having Alzheimer, but brain being basically destroyed by Alzheimer, but them not showing symptoms, and then this little boy. So it shows that although we're limited by our body, if we use our mind in the right way, we can actually grow beyond that. So when you look at some of the great lamas, I mean, they're amazing. They have a human body. Okay, the idea is that they're not born with the same kind of body we are, but there may also be some who were just born with an ordinary human body, and through the power of meditation, they were able to overcome these limitations that were there because of their brains initially, that we ordinarily face, but we can actually go beyond that because it is mind over body. So I think there's a good news to it and there's a bad news. The bad news is we're limited. Right? So that's part of the meditation we do. The meditation of the first close placement of mindfulness on the body, while understanding that this body is limited. Unclean doesn't just mean it smells after a few weeks. Or it smells terrible when we rot. You don't want to hear what it says in the Golden Rosary. I mean, Tibetans are pretty straightforward. Lama Tsongkhapa says, look at this body. Once it dies, it's rotten and worm-eaten. And even before death. That's the vocabulary he uses. But anyway, so it's true. This body is not clean. I mean, it smells disgusting once we die, right? I mean, when I die, you want to get rid of my body quickly. It's going to be a real nuisance, right? I'm just talking about my body. So it's really it's not made of something. We're so attached to it, and we're so look after it, and we're so concerned about it, obsessed about it to a certain degree. But actually, let's face it. It is a vessel. It's a useful vessel, but that's all it is. And we go beyond this. The goal is to actually go beyond our limitations and to utilize our mind in the most effective way. But the first step is to really understand our limitations so that we generate the wish to go beyond it. It is a limited body. We can do so much better. Right? So that's the first close placement of mindfulness. Understanding the limitations of this body and therefore the actual limitations of our mind that potentially goes along with this body. That is basically our mind being limited by the body. And so to generate the wish, the incentive to remove what limits us so that we can go beyond in a way that is right now inconceivable. Right? But the good thing is we can all do it. That's what Buddha nature is all about. We can all be like the Dalai Lama. We can all be like the Buddha. Right? Okay. So that's the first part. So first understanding, recognizing our limitation. And then looking at the cause. What is the cause? Okay? The cause is found in our mind, nowhere else. We look for causes all in the wrong places. Cause and effect in Buddhism are extremely important. Again, when you study the second chapter of the Pramanavartika, boy, you learn about special indispensable causes. What is the other word? I forget the word. A direct cause with something potential, unlimited potential or something. I forget the English translation now. But anyway, so all these different types of causes. Why? Because we're so notoriously wrong about identifying the causes of our suffering. Right? What are the causes of my problem? I identify other people, usually other people. Right? My neighbor who's too loud, or my friend who annoys me, my boss who is really angry. We always identify those as the main causes. They're just secondary conditions. Okay. So really the main cause of our experiences are our actions in the past. which is actually great. Which is actually great. Oh my God. Because I can't change my boss, but I can change my actions. Really, that's very good news. So we often feel we're so limited and we feel like, gosh, I can't do anything. But actually there's so much we can do, because it's really our mind. If we transform our mind, situations will change. And it seems impossible right now, but you just need to try it. Just need to try it. And of course, the simplest way is just as Shantideva, well, that's simple, but one very basic way of looking at it is like Shantideva says. You can't cover the entire earth with leather, right, in order to not be stung by the thorns, etc. But instead, if you cover your feet with leather, you'll have the same result. So basically, we can't change everyone else around us, but if we change our mind, and we no longer get upset by it, we no longer get have a resentment, etc., then the result is the same. So it's much more difficult to change the entire world. It's much easier, or it's actually impossible to change the entire world. Forgetting about it being impossible. But it's so much easier to change our own mind. And so then, when things arise, our feelings will be different. Because our feelings right now, our feelings are such, we get really upset, we get really frustrated, etc. And as a result of that, of course, anger and so forth arises. So then if a situation arises, we can learn to be open to it. And okay, that's a challenge. How great. There's a challenging situation. There's something I can learn from this. And take it with a different attitude, basically. Learn to, any situation that arises, it's okay. Right? It's great. It's a good situation. Oh, that's nice. Right? That's nice. Let's enjoy it for as long as it lasts and not be like me, the emotional yo-yo. Yeah. Oh my God. And then suddenly it's gone and like, wow, what a disappointment. So instead of reacting with this strong kind of expectation, like this strong joy that's full of expectation that wants it to last, to become more level-headed, basically. And of course to understand that although of course pleasure, there's nothing wrong with being pleased and happy. In fact, like I talked about it yesterday, Dharma practice makes you happier in general. Much more happy. But if you understand also the relationship between feelings and attachment, then you can be happy. You can learn to be happy and just enjoy things, even the things that would usually depress us. To look at this as a challenge, to look at it as something we can learn from. So if we can do that, then this feeling of pleasure no longer gives rise to the kind of craving, because craving is the problem. Just enjoy it for what it is. Enjoy the pleasure without having expectations for it to last, because it's like expecting quicksand to stay with you. It's like what we're trying to do is trying to build things on quicksand. That's usually the example that's given. Quicksand just very quickly moves through. So our experiences are like that. They're transient. They're like changing all the time. So to just take them as they come, without allowing this feeling of pleasure to give rise to craving. Okay, but when we look at the close placement of mindfulness, we're actually trying to understand the causes for having this body, this limited body, and therefore this limited mind. And really, when we look at the types of awareness that are the causes, well, it's basically afflictions. And of those afflictions, craving is a major one. And where does that arise from? It arises from feelings. So we need to watch our feelings. We need to learn more about our feelings. Understand that our feelings are actually in the nature of suffering. That even the pleasant types of feelings we have, that we grow so attached to, are not true happiness. They're not true happiness because they don't last. If they were true happiness, there would be no reason for them to go away. And also to become aware that the objects we identify as that which give us true happiness, again, they're in the nature of suffering. So usually we mistake the feeling of pleasure, and the object that provides the pleasure we confuse them, we fuse them together. We're not able to separate. We feel this person over there is truly pleasurable. It's not the feeling that is the pleasurable thing. It is the person who's pleasurable. It's the object that's pleasurable. It's the situation that's pleasurable. Having a good reputation is pleasurable. Being praised is pleasurable. It's actually just the feeling that arises as a result of that that is pleasurable. But we fuse the two together. And therefore we think that is true happiness. And we keep running after it. Our entire life. I mean, we're like little ants, never stand still. Need to go here and I went there and never, right? I mean, I think it's so beautiful. It's expressed even in the way we sit in a meditation. If you take a video of people meditating or just sitting here and you run it faster, it'd be like, right? Like we constantly trying to find a comfortable position. So our entire life is like running after comfort, right? As we sit there, we cannot bear any discomfort, so we have to keep moving, okay? The whole time we're moving. And then, I mean, what we do, if you think about it, I mean, if you enjoy food, it sounds bizarre, but the fact we have to feed ourselves, in the morning, and then a few hours later, again, and then again. I mean, how much time do we spend just going for food, right? And then the food is like digested, and then we spend so much time in the bathroom. And then next, we have to clean this body all the time. We have to sleep. Actually, if you think about it, what a waste of time. If those 7, 8, 9 hours every night, we could do other things. I mean, we like sleeping, so I guess then it's like, well, what's the big deal? I like doing it. But actually, if we could use this time, if we didn't have to sleep, we could do other things. Wouldn't that be great? So basically, we're so limited, and it takes us back to the body, of course. But also, well, the point being that this body is the result of our feelings, basically, of acting according to our feelings. So feelings is what drives us. Feelings are that which drives this world. In fact, if there were no feelings, I don't think you would have advertising. You wouldn't have the huge department stores. You wouldn't have many of the things that are basically, I mean, well, I wouldn't say a waste of time, but, they keep us from actually engaging in things that are truly meaningful, right? So feelings are that which give rise to war, etc. But of course, we can't really blame the feelings themselves. It's actually what comes after the afflictions. But it's that process. We need to learn that process of understanding the object of pleasure and the pleasure are not the same. And then how that pleasure, without any control, gives rise to craving. I want more. I want more of that. I want it to be repeated. At least, well, first of all, I want it to be repeated. Then I want more. And then I can't live without it. And I feel like, oh my God, I can't be without it. So we're so tied to so many things because we believe that thing, or whatever the object is truly pleasurable. In and of itself, it's pleasurable. And I can't live without it. Because how could I be happy without it? Right? And then we're attached. And then so many worries arise because of the thing we're attached to is transient. It's changing all the time. There's nothing to attach to. So it's like holding sand again in your hands and hoping it sticks to you. And worrying all the time because it's not. That's our life. It's very worrisome. We spend so much energy. Amazing the kind of energy we spend on just our craving for, trying to satisfy our craving for certain feelings. Even repulsion arises, or even a negative feeling. And anger, therefore, is based on craving. When we have a feeling of unhappiness, when there's an unpleasant feeling, that usually gives rise to resentment, etc. Why? Because we crave the absence of this negative feeling. We crave the absence of it. Right? So therefore our lives are basically controlled by good feeling, negative feeling, and craving for one and craving for the absence of the other. So therefore we're slaves of our own craving. And that's where when we understand the second, or when we practice the second close mindfulness on feeling, well, that's where we get to understand, what we come to understand. It's our craving. That is the problem. Then we move to the next type of mindfulness, the third type of close placement of mindfulness, this time on the mind. Now this relates to the fact that it is possible to remove craving. It's possible. It's not in our nature. It's not in the nature of our mind. It's extra. We can remove it. How can we remove it? Well, we remove it because its root is just a misperception. It's as simple as that. Actually, when you explain it, it's pretty simple. We just misperceive what's there. We misperceive the I. We don't understand how we really exist. Now, this is something very fascinating. If you look at your own sense of self, we all have a sense of I. But honestly, when we think about it, it's not as simple as just I. It's much more than that. Because not only do we believe there's the separate I, separate from mind and body, but we also reinforce it all day long. I'm like this. I'm like that. I am kind. I get angry sometimes. I'm like this. So the thoughts we have, actually our sense of I is actually, it's just a collage of thoughts. It's like a collage. You know, from morning to evening, there are thoughts. Someone tells me, I am whatever. I'm good at making hummus. Not me. I mean, no one ever told me that. I don't know how to make hummus. But, someone tells me that. And right away I go, oh, my mind registers, I'm good at making hummus. So that's part of my identity now. I'm good at making hummus. Someone else tells me, I'm good at organizing birthday parties, right? I'm just making it up here. Never organized a birthday party. But, so I'm good at that. Or I'm a good student. Or I'm lousy at explaining things. Or I have a what do you call that? A short temper. I have a short temper. So all these things, other people telling me, or I get these, so there are these thoughts. I'm like that. I'm like that, right? So just in relation to people telling me, is there something truly there, like a truly birthday party organizer expert? No, if I look for it, not really, to be fair, but it is my thought, I'm like this. And then you add, I'm like this, I'm like that. So check your sense of self. It's changing, right? Because you hear different things. And certain things remain similar, of course. Certain things you forget about because you haven't thought about it for long enough. So your sense of identity slightly changes. But there's still this strong sense, there's one I that's always unchanging all the way through since you were little. That sense of a lasting I. And then we kind of seem to paste things on top of it. But when you really look for it, you can't find it. So this is what we talk about when we say we impute things. It's this thought, I'm like this, I'm like that, I'm like this. If you don't have that thought, for instance, if you, like say you're a woman, right? What's your name? Yeah? Yeah? What's your name? Who answered just? Your name is... Yeah, yes, your name. Annie Lilach. Lilach. Alle Annie. Annie Lilach. Oh, my name is Aimka Samum. Lilach. So, Lilach, what does she think? She's a daughter. Your daughter, obviously. So, she's a daughter. So there's this thought, I'm a daughter. That... She's not absolutely a daughter because she's only a daughter in relation to her parents, right? In relation to your parents, you're a daughter. So the thought, I'm a daughter, arises. At the same time, are you a mother? You're a mother. So she's a mother. She's a mother. So again, in relation to something other than herself, her children, her child or her children, then there's the thought, I'm a mother. There's no absolute mother. There's no absolute mother, no absolute daughter to be found. It's in relation to something else that then we say, she's a mother, she's this. So this is part of the collage, right? In relation to her husband, she's a wife. In relation to a man, she's a woman. In relation to her siblings, she's a sister. Do you have siblings? In relation to your siblings, to her sibling, she's a sister. So there are all these kind of relative ideas, and that's what creates lilach. Is there some absolute lilach? No. I mean, even that name is given in relation to something else. Someone chose to call her that. No lilach to be found. In terms of the mother, no mother to be found there, other than in relation to a certain child or children, then we say, she's a mother. And that's it. So what seems to be there so solidly, lilach, who from her point of view is the center of the universe, just as from my point of view, I'm the center of the universe. If you really look for this, they're just these ideas we have. They're just ideas in the end. And even those ideas are just ideas. So we don't really find anything solidly there, but it appears to be very solid, very clearly defined. I and you. It seems very clearly defined. But even that, I'm just I in relation to you. And if I were I, and it feels like I'm really I'm the center of the universe. But actually, if we turn things around, from your perspective, I'm other. From your perspective, I'm less important. Right? But I feel my perspective is the absolute perspective. That's the right one. And she's just intrinsically secondary. But that is totally relative. I'm only secondary from my perspective. But from your you're only secondary from my perspective. But from your perspective, I'm secondary. So what justifies me feeling I'm the center of the universe? Nothing. Because when you look for that, there's nothing there. Why am I more important? I'm not. Right? And then you may argue, well, because my mind experiences things and I experience my trouble and so forth. But actually what's very interesting is we have a sense, there's this mind and I know what's going on and I experience the things that are happening. But actually, a lot of what is there, we're not even aware of. We feel like this is my body. But a lot of what's going on in my body, I have no idea. I don't want to know, actually. Digestion, all that stuff. There's so much happening right now. I have no idea of. But also with our mind. This is also something you find in the second chapter of the Pramanavartika. It says in there that every time we breathe, there is a consciousness, an exertion that makes us breathe. Right? And you hear this and you go, nah, I breathe automatically. Right? And then if you think about it again, if there was not a mind telling me to breathe, well, is there a mind that tells me to sit straight when I'm awake? Doesn't feel that way. I mean, I sit straight. I sit up. But if I fall asleep, I fall over. Why do I fall over? Why do I fall over when I fall asleep? Well, because there's no longer a mind telling me, sit straight. So when we talk about being on autopilot, actually that's impossible. So when you drive a car, we're not even aware of these subtle awarenesses that help us to drive a car. And at the same time, fight with the person next to us. Right? We can do that, with a husband or partner or someone, but you still get home. Sometimes if the fight is really ferocious, you may end up somewhere else. But the point is, when we do all these things, it seems like we are on autopilot. We are multitasking. We don't multitask, by the way. We never multitask. We can't multitask. We just do the things very quickly back and forth. Because again, the same idea, our consciousness can just quickly go from one to the other. So we're just really going very quickly from... Not even a computer can multitask. A computer, the term apparently multitasking comes from the computer, and even the computer can't multitask. It can only switch very quickly back and forth, I've been told, not that I know. So, likewise with our mind, we can just only very quickly switch back and forth. But are we aware of that? No, we're not even aware of 10% of what's going on in our mind. So really the sense I exist, I'm here, is that it's one type of awareness of all the different awarenesses we have, believing I'm the center of the universe. And all these other awarenesses, that particular one feeling I is not even aware of. If you were to ask me, are you aware of your awareness that is keeping you straight up right now? Not at all. Am I aware of my motivation? Even while I talk to you, I'm not even aware. It's just coming, right? And sometimes I'm thinking, oh, that's interesting. I say something, and I go, oh, whoops, where did that come from? It just comes, right? I just blurt it out, and then I go, oh, how embarrassing. Or, oh, that was surprising. Where does that come from? So it's like the sense of I'm in control, I'm this person, I'm here. If you check a little further, what is it? What is that thing? What control? I'm not even aware of what's going on in my body, and I certainly don't know what's going on in my mind. The fact that at night, for 8 hours, I have really no control. Those dreams just doing their thing, and then I'm in deep sleep. So it's a total illusion, if you think about it. So my sense of I is just a collage I put together, right? And I limit myself terribly with this collage, actually. I limit myself, actually. I'm like this. I cannot do this. Great. The moment I put on the label, I cannot do that, I don't even try to do it. Okay? So in a way, on top of limiting ourselves, on top of being grasping at this I and being self-cherishing and so forth, but we also limit ourselves. I'm just a normal person. I can't do this, I can't do that. It's those thoughts that limit us. That's why you have these mystical practices like Tantra that tell you the sky is the limit. You can do anything. Right? Of course, with care, with caution. Not anyone is advised to do these practices, but it's basically to get rid of that constant limited view of ourselves that we create ourselves, basically. Does that make sense? So, therefore, actually, the I, as we perceive it, doesn't exist. Not to say Lilach doesn't exist. That'd be ridiculous. She's right there. No one is saying Lilach doesn't exist. But she's merely designated. She's just imputed on the basis. We say Lilach when we talk about different types of awareness, right? That very quickly one after the other arise and do their thing. And a body that does its thing. There's no controller. Although we feel that way. Your sense of I is like I'm controlling things. But I am not aware of most of what's going on. What control? Right? I'm not controlling. There's nothing to control. There's one awareness, a particular one, of the different ones we have. And it's not all of them, because the sense of I is not always there. Right? Sometimes I'm too busy to think of I. Right? But it's just, so therefore it's just that type of mind, that what we call ignorance, that misperceiving mind, that is the troublemaker. So how do I counteract that misperceiving mind? By understanding that its object doesn't exist. Right? It's as simple as that. If you believe there's a monster in a closet, right? How do you deal with that misperception that there's a monster in the closet? Are you going to take a sleeping pill? Well, yeah, so maybe you won't be fearful as long as you sleep, but in the end you don't get rid of that misperception. So you look inside the cupboard. You check. Is there a monster or not? Is there a monster in the closet or not? You open it, there's nothing there. All right. Misperception gone. So that's exactly what we do. If there's such an I, if there's such a controller, if there's this permanent self that is more important, well, let's look for it. Let's find it. Right? It better be there. It better be there, because my entire life has been about this. I've been obsessing about this. It better be there. But I'm joking here. So basically the idea is to look for it, and then you're like, oh my God, I don't find it. I don't find that I, that self. Where is it? Okay. So all you end up, well, what you find initially is you there's a mind Just consciousness. And that mind, that consciousness, it's, different ones, one after the other, arising. A thought, I should have a shower, then, let's have some lunch, different awarenesses. Oh, there's a beautiful tree. And they're just different awarenesses, one giving rise to the next, and that's it. And every time there's a mind, it's kind of like saying, oh, that's all me. Every memory of thoughts, I kind of take them on. Oh, this is me, right? And associate it with I. But that I is just an illusion. Okay? So, then, imagine that falls away. Can you actually imagine, oh my God, I got some freedom. I can breathe. But actually, the initial step is that there's fear. Fear may arise. That's actually a good thing. Oh my God, it's not there? Then what is all this about? Right? My whole life about it. So fear may arise, but then it's not a bad fear. It's not a fear that is terrible and like, you can no longer breathe or whatever. It's just this moment of, whoa. And then once you go on, you break through this, then there's a sense of relief. So that's the cessation in a way, right? It's a liberation. Because once you understand the mind is not there and you're actually able to remove that misperception altogether, there's no longer any craving and attachment, right? I mean, what do you attach to? Attach to what? Attached to what? What do you crave? And also with regard to other people, what is there to crave? If I'm attached to another person, I believe there's something solidly there that I'm attached to. But once I understand that's not true for me, well, it cannot be true for someone else. So the thing I believe in, where is the attachment? So how this attachment falls away with regard to the I and with others, I think the internet is very helpful to help us understand that. For me, this has been very helpful. When you're attached to a person, you believe there's something there. And the stronger the attachment, the stronger our worry, etc. So this is different from love. Love gives, attachment takes. So love is like wishing for the person to be happy. All right, there's a mind, there's a body. The mind wishes to be happy. I wish for that person to be happy. That's love. But attachment is not, oh, there's a mind, I want that. It's the whole, there's like a person there. There's more than just mind and body. There's this person there, and this I need to make me happy. But if I find this person doesn't exist, attachment can no longer be there. So I give you the example of the internet. It's similar, it's not exactly the same, but it works similarly. I once saw a documentary about a guy who chatted with someone online, and he liked to chat, and he met this beautiful girl, very pretty, right? And she was so kind and so loving. So they chatted to each other over a long period of time, and he totally fell in love with her, and she sent him pictures in the bikini, and she was very pretty, very young. Anyway, so it went on for a while, and I don't remember all the details, but he wanted to meet her. And then when he made an effort, he found out, actually there was no girl. There was only her, well, the girl existed, but she was not the one chatting to him. It was her 65-year-old mom, who was kind of lonely, and she was, so she pretended she met this guy, and they had a nice connection. And, in the end, it came out that this mother had used her daughter's picture to pretend, so sent these pictures. And so imagine what the guy thought. The moment he realized there was no person, what do you think happens to his craving? Gone. Right? Gone. It's not, what do you crave, right? What do you grasp? What are you attached to? Gone. I thought that was a really good example. How if we understand myself, there's not such a solid I, and there's also no solid I for the other person, then we have space for true love. Because this obsession and that craving and attachment, there's no room for it. What to attach to? It's not there. So then you have space for true love. I still want that person to be happy. They're just like me. Just labeled on mind and body, but still just like me. So I want them to be happy. I don't want them to suffer. And we have a totally different attitude towards others. Does that make sense? Right? So therefore, with regard to the third close placement of mindfulness, which is focusing on the mind. Really, who are we? There are different minds, different awarenesses that pop up. That's basically who we are. Right? And so they change all the time. And therefore there can't be an I, a solid I, that overlooks all of those. Because if there was such a self, it would really be able to control all of those and be aware of all of those. But these minds just popping up and that's it. So that understanding, therefore, leads us to understanding so we take that mind, understand its impermanence, and understand that with an ever-changing mind, there couldn't be a self. But it's also not the case that the self doesn't exist at all, in the sense that there's no solid, permanent, independent self. That doesn't exist. The sense we have of ourselves, that's impossible. But there's still a conventional I, because based on these different moments of awareness, I can still label I, for the sake of convenience, so I don't get confused with I and others, right? So I label I label other, right, for the sake, and that's it. There's no true I to be found, but there's still an I there, so we still say it conventionally exists. Otherwise we would fall into the extreme of nihilism. So, with this understanding, the impermanence of the mind, we can understand that the cessation is possible. The cessation of the first truth and the second truth. So getting rid of craving, because of getting rid of the misperception, getting rid of the second truth. And if the craving, the origin of suffering, is no longer there, then there's also not the symptom, the result of the origin of suffering, which is the first truth, the truth of suffering. That can no longer arise. So the cessation is basically getting rid of the cause of suffering and therefore of suffering itself. So the first true truth. And that getting rid of that cessation is found in the mind. It is the mental consciousness that is liberated from the afflictions, etc. So again, you find that on the mind. So therefore, with the third close placement of mindfulness on the mind, in particular focusing on the mind and on the characteristic of impermanence, we can come to understand that there is no independent self, that there's still a conventional self labeled on those parts of the mind, and with that understanding, we remove the misperception from the mind and attain what's called cessation. Does that make sense? So this is how the cessation of suffering, the third noble truth, relates to the third close placement of mindfulness on the mind. Okay. So I hope this is clear. I said it a few times, but I realize it has to be explained a few times to understand it clearly. And we'll do a meditation on that type, but since it's to do with emptiness and we're just slowly getting more into emptiness, I'll leave it for a little bit for now. Okay. And then the fourth type. I think a lot of us struggle with this a little bit more. The fourth type. Now, having looked at the body, feelings, and mind, just mental consciousness, mind, now we look at the different types of minds. So phenomena now include all the variety of love, compassion, anger, all the different types of minds. And of course, phenomena, the fourth category, includes more than just that. But anything that is part of us, that is associated with us as practitioners who want to achieve the cessation of suffering. Now, we take from that category of different phenomena and look at the things that we now need to do, gradually need to adopt, and versus the things we need to get rid of, because that's what Buddhist practice is all about. It's a little bit like treatment, like medical treatment, right? If you're sick and you want to reach, so the sickness, the symptoms is like the first truth, the truth of suffering. That's the symptom, the limitation we have. Then the truth of origin is like the cause, the actual cause of the disease. The cessation is understanding, well, I only need to remove the cause, so the cessation is possible. So once I understand that, then I need to engage in treatment, which means I need to refrain from doing certain things and engage in doing other things, right? So I need to refrain from eating oily food, for instance, from overexerting myself, from what else? From partying all night long, smoking and drinking, right? So certain things to get better, I need to refrain from because they are responsible for the disease. I refrain from them. And other things I need to take on. Go do exercising, take medicine, whatever you need to do in order to get better. So Buddhist practice just like that. Refrain from certain things and adopt other things. And you do them gradually. It's not like you take it, you're done. It's like expecting to get well the next day. That doesn't happen. It's a gradual process. So here, likewise, understanding that of phenomena which include the different types of awareness, love, compassion, anger, and so forth, there's some we now need to adopt and some we need to refrain from. And that's basically Buddhist practice, to learn what is and this is individually very different. If I have a huge problem with anger, then I need to engage more in the practices that address that anger. If my main problem is jealousy, then I need to address that. Right? So, different ways, basically, how I treat myself. And that refers to the last, the close placement of mindfulness, understanding, after having understood everything else, now I look at phenomena, in particular, love, compassion versus anger, and so forth. So really getting to understand what is it that keeps me, what is it that keeps me in this limited state, what is it I need to take out, to get out of it, and then act accordingly. Right? So they're described as focusing on that which is afflicted and that which is pure. To use the terminology here. So the thoroughly afflicted and the completely pure. But this is just words. So focusing on that which is helpful and working with that, love, compassion, understanding of reality, of interdependence and so forth, that's helpful. And then remove, on the other hand, thoughts of hatred, thoughts of aversion, thoughts of resentment, and work with those. Does that make sense? So there you have it. Four Noble Truths. Based on the 4 close placements of mindfulness. Okay? So this is how Gyaltsab-je and Lama Tsongkhapa both explain them as part of an explanation of the 37 practices, what do you call them, concordant to enlightenment or in harmony, sometimes they're called the 37 harmonies to enlightenment. Yeah, it really in Tibetan it just means the 37 that move in the direction, that are in the direction of enlightenment, right? That are in concordance with enlightenment, basically. So, and of those 37 practices, well, the first 4 are the close placement of mindfulness. And of course, when you look at the definition of a close placement of mindfulness in general, which there are 4 types of them, well, what it says is basically, it's saying it's a path consciousness, in the sense it's a consciousness that is influenced by the wish to either be liberated or by the wish to become fully enlightened. So in other words, it is conjoined with what's called renunciation or bodhicitta. Okay? So renunciation is just the wish to be liberated. And bodhicitta is the wish to become fully enlightened in order to be of benefit to all sentient beings. Okay? So once those 2 minds have been generated, have been in your continuum, you basically have the wish to go somewhere. And that's when you start going. Without just wishing to go somewhere, doing practices like Buddhist practices without wishing to go somewhere, you don't go there. Right? It's like walking around without having the wish to go somewhere. You're not going to get to where you want to go. So Buddhist practices are usually done with a particular goal in mind. And so, strictly speaking, the close placements of mindfulness are said to be a type of wisdom or mindfulness that is influenced by the wish to either be liberated or fully enlightened. That is one aspect. But it doesn't mean we cannot practice them, although we don't have the wish to go there. That's okay. We can still do these practices. But strictly speaking, that's the definition. It is the close placement of mindfulness, either wisdom or mindfulness, and it's a path consciousness, and it focuses on one of the four: mind, body, feeling, mind, or phenomena, on any of the four, and then takes the specific characteristics of those. So specifically, or let's just finish. So first the specific and the general characteristics. So the specific characteristics of one of the four and the general ones. And now the question is, that one of the debates that arise is, what does the specific characteristic refer to? What does the general characteristic refer to? And then there's different ways of different answers to this, but in the end, I think they all make sense. Either, if you take the specific characteristics, let's say of the body, you focus just on your own body, whereas with the general characteristic, you focus on the body of others. Right? That's one interpretation of, you focus on the body and analyze the general and the specific characteristics of the body. So some would say that means you focus on your own body and thereafter on the body of everyone else. And that makes perfect sense, in particular in the context of the Mahayana. First you check, how is my body limited, etc. But then let's look around. We have a responsibility to others who are just like us, limited. And if we can get out, we should help others to get out, or reach the state of enlightenment, of awakening. Once we reach that, well, we need to take others to that same state, because they're just as limited as we are. So therefore, focusing on our own body, as in like our own body, specific characteristic, our own body, and then general characteristic, the body of others. But another interpretation would be, you take the characteristic with regard to the body of only the uncleanliness, only the body being unclean. That's the main focus here, like described before with regard to the Four Noble Truths. But that's actually not enough. So not only do you understand that the body is unclean, you understand it's in the nature of suffering, it's impermanent, it doesn't exist truly. So these are the general characteristics, where you take all these different characteristics, anything you need to know about the body in order to become enlightened. Anything you need to know about all phenomena, basically. So similar with feeling in general, with the specific characteristic, we apply it to understanding feeling to be in the nature of suffering, giving rise to craving and so forth. But in general, understanding that feeling is impermanent, that feeling doesn't exist inherently, that feeling is not experienced by an independent self, and so forth. So understanding anything that can be understood about feeling, that is necessary to be understood to become enlightened. And then you do the same for mind and the same for phenomena. Okay, so the general characteristic of mind would be understanding the mind is so the specific characteristic of mind would be to understand that the mind is impermanent, as explained before, as the specific characteristic, but then also understanding all the general characteristics. It is not just impermanent, it's also in the nature of suffering. It is an effect, it is also a cause. It doesn't exist inherently, it exists interdependently, and everything else that is to be known, that needs to be understood about the mind, again, in order to generate wisdom and move closer towards enlightenment. And then lastly, the same is true for phenomena. The specific characteristic here, in the context of the Four Noble Truths, is understanding that which is to be adopted and that which is to be refrained from. So those phenomena that are thoroughly afflicted, and those that are completely pure, to use that vocabulary. So those that need to be adopted, those that we need to refrain from. That is the specific characteristic. And then everything else we need to know about phenomena in general. Okay, those are the general characteristics. So really the four types of mindfulness, the four close placement of mindfulness, in terms of their object, they take all phenomena and understand how they're impermanent, how they're in nature of suffering, well, all phenomena means all phenomena we experience, that they're selfless, that they're causes giving rise to results and so forth. So understanding really everything we need to understand about them to become fully enlightened. Of course, there are certain things we don't need to understand, but there are certain aspects, the misunderstanding of which is responsible for our suffering, which therefore we have to understand the opposite of what we perceive. If we perceive things to exist inherently, well, we need to understand that that's impossible. Okay. That's a crash course on the Four Noble Truths and the Four Close Placements of Mindfulness. Yes, Varda? Can you wait? Can you wait? Unless it's a clarification. Okay, so if you can wait, because unless it's a clarification. If it's not a clarification, then we'll do it a little after. It's a clarification? Ah, okay. Let's hear then.
One of them, you said that the mind that is involved in mindfulness is also concentration. The mind is a mind.
Ah, sorry, it's not a clarification. It's not a clarification. So please wait. Please wait. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. So now, with regard to the four close placements of mindfulness, I think they're hopefully clear to some degree. Of course, we need to get more into now the mind, in particular the third close placement of mindfulness. We haven't done a meditation on. Why? Because it's pretty much about emptiness. It's focusing on the mind and understanding selflessness or emptiness. Now, we've already spoken about this when starting with this text. Okay, so after the break, I'll do a meditation now on the third close placement of mindfulness, but I want to go back into this text a little bit more, so we'll be able to finish it today, and also the other text. But one thing I'd like to say, I'm sure, well, anyway, I don't need to mention, but someone came up to me, and it was a very good point, and this person who said this to me, he was not the first person saying this to me. That what we started doing, what is the body, how does it exist, for instance, that seems to be mere semantics. This person is not the first one saying that. It's not a total new thing for me to hear this question. It seems like semantics. We're just going on about, is it this, is it that, etc. So, does anyone else feel in the same way? Does anyone have the same sense? It's just semantics. No, the question was, when we say, what is the body? Like this investigation, the analysis that is done in this text. So we have a very strong sense of what my body is. So then saying, is it the hips? Is it the arms? That is just semantics. That's just words. That's really just saying, is it this? Is it that? Of course, in the end, it's just parts, and they're not actually the body. So it is an interesting sense, and like I said, I have had people come up to me and say, well, that's just semantics. What are we doing here? Pardon? Well, that's the thing. So, actually, what Sippy is saying is right. Actually, from a Buddhist point of view, yes, everything is just semantics, in the sense that we merely impute table on an object. But if we feel it's just semantics, either we've realized emptiness. That would mean we have no longer any. Well, we don't have anger to the same degree. We don't have attachment to the same degree. We would. I wouldn't say we're already enlightened, because there's a little bit more to be done. But we be someone very, very special, and I guess we can check ourselves. Whether we are, and I don't want to say this person may actually be. I cannot identify someone. I mean, we just know ourselves. But it could also be another option, another possibility would be that we haven't identified the object of negation properly. So this is extremely important, and that's very difficult. We are not denying everything. That's important. We're denying something specific. We're negating something specific. And to identify that is very difficult. So to only say a few words about this, there's not much I can say about it, really. But to get a sense there's a difference between identifying the object of negation when it's the self versus something that is not connected to me, like a car, for instance, or the body, which is kind of an in-between. Right? There's a sense. The self is the closest sense I have. The self is the one I feel closest to, and then from there, the body is slightly further away. And my possessions, likewise. Someone's car, oh my God, someone else's car. What do I care? Right? But I perceive all these phenomena to be inherently existent. That misperception I have with regard to everything, but my emotional link to them is different. Okay, so therefore there's a slight difference in terms of how I identify the object. The self is that which, you embarrass me. Oh, right? You say something in front of everyone. I mean, we can try that. If someone wants to volunteer, let's embarrass that person. But when you're with lots of people, you can really feel that I, right? You walk into a room and everyone is looking at you. Oh, me, they're looking at me. There's a very strong sense of that. It's not the mind, it's not the body, it's the I they're looking at. So that is something that sense you don't get with a car, unless you are the car, when everyone is looking at you. So you don't get that sense with a car. So it's a slightly different way in which you need to identify it. And I've been really thinking about this a lot. So if it's always easier if it's your own car. Have you ever had the sense that your car has a personality? I remember my mom would always give her cars names. They all had names. So they had different names. So just because she gave them a name, so was a guy's name. Never mind, it's not important. But so was Julius or something. Anyway, so they had cars, they had names, and so there was a sense, there's a personality there. There's something there that made the engine not start, when she had to go to work, and there seems to be something there. It's not the steering wheel, it's not the wheels, it's not the engine. There's something that controls all of those, right? Or with a house. If it's your own house, there's your house. It's your protector. It's kind of looking at you. Hey, your bag. I don't know, have you ever noticed? And it's very beautifully depicted in like cartoons, when cupboards jump around and talk to you. I guess it's like in children cartoons, that's also oftentimes that objects talk to you. So in a way, I think we have a sense that things have a personality to some degree, especially if they're close to us. So for me, that's a good way of looking at it. Like my body. Yeah, my body has arms, has legs, has all these, but it's that which holds those together. It's that which deserts me or not. It's that which serves as a vessel. It's this thing. Am I making sense? So that's what we're trying to look at. I don't know if anyone has an idea of how else to identify the object of negation here. There's something other than its parts. There's something there that I can communicate with, that I can see, that I'm attached to. Right? So another example they usually give. No. That's an example for something. It works slightly. So actually, when I say car or when I say house, it is just giving the name to that which, it's a house, right? So I call it a house. So there's actually, when I think about it, there's not such an object that has a personality. But then I couldn't be attached. If I really understood that it's just a house, I would not be attached to my house. I would not be attached to my car. I would not get angry. So I could not be angry. So just check. Do you still get angry? You didn't get it. Right? If there's still anger, am I attached to a certain person, his or her body? Strong sexual desire arises, right? Then it depends on the degree of it, of course. But because initially when you realize emptiness, you still have the afflictions. They're still there. They need to now slowly be removed. So actually, but they say the afflictions can no longer grow or arise to the same degree. Right? Okay. And this is only the person, yourself can tell. But the point is that there's nothing to be attached to any longer. If it's just a name, if that's all it is. And it'd be very easy for you to put others before yourself because you're just imputed. You just call it I, but others I. It's equally just an I. So there's no reason for preferences and so forth. Right? Am I making sense? And so the example that is used is that, like just being imputed, where nothing can be found. The example they use is that of a snake and a snake body versus a rope that looks like a snake that I mistake to be a snake. Okay, just think of this scenario. There's a rope, the speckled rope, coiled together in a slightly dark place, and you label snake on the object. Right? Oh my God, a poisonous snake. Do you have poisonous snakes in the desert? Yeah. Or a certain scorpion that is... Do you have deadly... oh, there you go. Good. All right. Deadly snakes and deadly... Because they're scary. I mean, by seeing them, we go, whoa, there's a strong emotional response. Now, that snake, actually, if it's imputed on the basis of a rope versus a snake imputed on a real snake, actually, from the point of view of not being able to find a snake, they're the same. But one we can call a snake because as a convention, as a society, we have decided to give the word snake to a particular object that has particular characteristics, and so therefore we call it snake. Right? So it's merely designated. But in one case, so in one case, it doesn't perform the function of a snake. In the other case, it does. But we're scared of the snake. We're scared of the snake, but we're not scared of the rope. So it shows that we believe there's actually a snake because of our fear of it. Right? Because of our fear of it. I mean, there's one thing to avoid it and not wanting to die, but there's something truly terrible. Okay? And so there are lots of examples that gives us a sense there's something intrinsic, there's something from the side of the object that has nothing to do with my mind. And one of my favorite examples that I think works really well, not in Tibetan society, because they don't have old-fashioned names. Their names are always fashionable. It's Tenzin, Lobsang, Kelsang, it's for centuries and they're given further. But in our society, in the West, certain names become old-fashioned. There are fashionable ones and unfashionable ones. So Moshe, I've been told, is an unfashionable name. I'm not sure everyone disagrees, but it's like I usually ask people, which name would you not give to your son or daughter? Right? What is it? Moshe. What else? Another name, a girl's name. Huh? Chaim. Okay, Chaim. Hope there's no Chaim here. Chaim. What else? The girl's name. Huh? Yocheved. Yocheved. Doesn't mean anything to me. So the thing is, what's interesting, there's something, it seems to be in the name. Something within the name. And so it seems to be from the side of the object. This is an old-fashioned name. It's just a name. And so many of you have heard this funny story. Actually, something funny happens to me once. With a friend, I was in a restaurant, and I was a little distracted. I wasn't very hungry, and she was talking, and I was just kind of going through the menu. And because all my brothers and sisters now are having kids, like girls' names, boys' names, and I just sort of like, oh, what would I call if I had a girl, what would I call her? And I was just going through not that I want a girl, but, it's just if I had one, what would I call her? And I go through the menu, and I see Shashuka. And I said to my friend, just kind of like, oh, if I had a girl, Shashuka would be a nice name, right? Because to me, Shashuka doesn't mean anything. It's just a nice sound. It does not mean a tomato egg dish, right? I had Shashuka in the meantime. Now I know what it tastes like. But, so the thing is like, when you hear Shashuka, there's something, it's inherent in this word. It's tomato. Like something arises to your mind. So that means there's, Shashuka, to me, it means something intrinsic in the object. Well, that again, something intrinsic. You would not call your daughter Shashuka, right? Pardon? Which word? Well, a referent object that seems to be inherent in the object. That's the thing. So, therefore, it seems to be, it's not just imputed. It's not just designated. It seems to be inherent. So it's intrinsic old-fashioned, or it's intrinsic stupid to call your daughter that. Fashion is another good example. 1 year you'll love those trousers. 1 year, boy, you would do anything to get them. I remember my teenage times. It was all about that. So 1 year, wow, we wanted these trousers. And the next year, you'd be embarrassed to walk around them because they're so unfashionable. Right? Again, there seems to be some intrinsic beauty. Or songs is another example. You arrive in India and you go, you kidding me? What kind of music are they listening to? All day long on the bus, right? So again, the kind of music that's inherently eloquent. This is inherently beautiful. This is beautiful music. So the fact that we go, how could they like that? They're so weird. How could they like that? The sense of, how could someone like that? That is really weird. That's a weird person. Again, it seems like there's an objective beauty, there's an objective that, and if you're not, there's something wrong with you. Those are weird people. If you have that thought, it implies that you feel there's something intrinsic in the object. It's not just labeled by my mind as beautiful or not. Right? So, beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. We say that, but that's just here. It's not deep within. It's not like we don't live it, right? There's this, so it's an intellectual, and this is our problem oftentimes. It's all just in the head. These ideas are oftentimes just in the head, but they don't govern our actions. Our actions are governed by very deep states of mind, deep emotional states, as well as a deep sense of how things really are. And often those two clash. Our rough intellectual understanding of how things make sense, and then our deep emotional sense. So that's why when we meditate, we first use the coarser type of intellectual mind, and then try to bring it deeper onto an emotional level so that our actions are transformed. Right? Okay, so these are just different examples that over the years have helped me a little bit to get a sense of the inherent, the identifying the object of negation and understanding how things really exist. There's one more example I like to share with you. Another example I find very helpful when we talk about cause and effect in Buddhism, right? And in general, anyway, cause and effect. There's a cause that gives rise to an effect. Again, we have a very clear-cut sense. This is the cause, this is the result, right? Pretty clear cut. There's something there that is called a cause and something that is a result. So when you take a classic example, a seed grows into a sprout, right? Classic example. So it seems very straightforward. First you have a little tiny seed, and then it transforms, and in the end you have the sprout. As if there was something, the seed is just doing in and of itself, it's doing its thing, and in and of itself it turns into a sprout. So it's just inherent in them. The seed is inherent in the seed, and the sprout is inherent in the sprout. That's it. But then, if I do an experiment with you, I'll take photographs of this process, of the seed growing into a sprout. Let's take photographs. Every 5 seconds, I take a photograph, and I put up a huge line, like a washing line, all over the kibbutz, right? And each picture is there that shows how the seed grows into the sprout. And I'll ask you to choose the picture where the seed is still a seed and where it is now a sprout. Which one is the one where it's still a seed? So you have all these moments. Do you think you'll all agree? No. Is any of you right or wrong? Again, no. Why? Why? Because it's a matter of labeling. Right? Now we call it, is that seed still a seed? Is it still a sprout? It's just a matter of labeling. Okay? So we may call it a seed as long as it doesn't have a little thing coming out. But when is the exact moment when this thing comes out? We can't even point that exact moment because any moment can be subdivided further. So there's no exact moment when that little green sprouty thing starts to grow out of it. So it's what seems to be so clear cut. This is seed, this is sprout. Actually isn't. It's only our usage of language that gives us the illusion it's clear cut. And so our sense of reality, we use words, we use labels and so forth, but only because we use them. We use them and then believe the thing in and of itself is such. This is where racism comes from, right? We give a person a label, and then we'll believe there's something in that person that makes them such and such. Okay? Actually, table, when we say table, there's no single table in this world that is the same table. So the tableness in this table and the tableness in any other table is totally different. There's nothing they have in common, actually. That's just by way of imputation that we say they have something in common. You would say, oh, we have something in common. Lilach and I have something in common. Why? Because we're both human. But her being a human and me being a human are totally different. We just use the same label because we have these similarities. That's it. And so when we say, for instance, there must be some objective reality, there must be, because yesterday there's a table and today there's a table. So there must be something objectively there because it's still there when I look again. It's a totally different object that I just continue to call table. That's it. But the actual basis of imputation is totally changed. It's no longer there. It's a totally different table. Right? Am I making sense? So anyway, this is just a basic, very basic explanation of this idea. I'll do some meditation. We'll do some meditation after the break. I'm pretty sure I'm over time. Oh no, I'm not. All right, so time is up. Well, let's take a 15 minutes break. And then after the break, we'll meditate on what I just talked about. Meditate on emptiness.